All right, it looks like that is streaming. So welcome everyone to this afternoon's program where we're going to look at school postcards of St. Joseph. Today speaking with us is local historian Cole Woodbury. Cole, I will go ahead and hand the Zoom call over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I appreciate everybody showing up today to see what I have to show. If you've ever seen one of my programs before, you know I'm an avid St. Joseph postcard collector and do many different types of programs on St. Joe cards. This one is going to be strictly on school postcards of St. Joseph. But first, I'd like to start by giving you a little bit of background about postcards in general. You know, when we think about postcards, we think about pictures of something and an ability to send it through the mail, you know, but postcards have really been around since the 1870s in the United States. And honestly, they looked a lot like this in those early days. They were not very exciting. They definitely not pictures or souvenirs. They were typically business reply cards. You know, this is one from St. Joseph Steam Printing Company, dated 1879, and it's literally just telling you we have credited your account with a certain amount of money. Basically, they paid a bill and they're letting them know that they received the payment. So they weren't very exciting, and they were government postal cards. So they had a pre-printed stamp on the back, so all you had to do was write an address, and you could print anything you want on the front. But it was mostly businesses that used them. It wasn't until 1893, when the Columbian World's Fair in Chicago took place, that the first souvenir postcards were created. And they had beautiful pictures and things of the exposition itself, all the different buildings and exhibition palaces, but they were a souvenir. But again, the only thing you could do on those cards was write a message on the front. You couldn't include, you know, you put an address on the back and that was it. If you wanted to include a message, it had to go on the picture side of the card. But again, they were government printed postal cards with the aftermarket printing of the exposition. So even though that was the first time souvenir postcards were used, they really didn't become super popular. And usually at this time, most of those types of cards were being sent out by businesses by salesmen. So here's one from the Tudor-Hosier Company in St. Joseph, who were wholesale manufacturers of boots and shoes, that a salesman was going to appear in their office at some time in the distant future to take an order. And this was just their pre-announcement way of letting you know that they were going to come. Again, weren't very exciting postcards. It wasn't until about 1898 when Congress passed the Private Postcard Mailing Act, which allowed individual publishers to publish and print their own postcards, that postcarding became to look like more like what we see them today. But even still, they didn't gain in real popularity because still the only thing you could put on the back of a postcard was an address. So this postcard dates from 1907. It happens to be a Thanksgiving postcard. But look at the address written on the back. It was sent to somebody in St. Joseph, Mr. Charles Frederick. But look at the handwriting, the care that was taken. And I use this just to illustrate the back of an undivided back postcard, those pre-1907 cards that where you could only place an address on the back. In 1907, I think it was May of 1907, they passed an act which put the familiar dividing line down the back of a postcard so that you could write an address and a message on the same side of the card. And what this allowed publishers to do was to print larger format pictures on the reverse side. And so souvenir postcards and postcarding craze in general just exploded in the United States. It became absolute craze. Picture what Twitter, Facebook, texting, all those things that we know today, postcards in the 1907 to about 1918, that was the Twitter, Facebook, that was that texting craze at the time. It was the new phenomenon. And so postcards just took off. And that's when you start to see postcards that are more showing of individual towns and cities and places and tourist attractions and things like that. So in St. Joseph today, we're going to talk solely about the schools in St. Joseph. So this is an early card about 1905, 1906, and it shows Roubidoux School. This was at the corner of Edmund Street at 10th. So where the junior college building is today, what everybody calls the junior college building, I think it's City View Apartments today. This is the school building that stood on that same corner earlier. This was the first purposely built high school in St. Joseph. And it was later torn down and replaced with this building, which is what most people still call the junior college building. This was at 10, this view is at 10th and Charles Street. And at the time it was the Polytechnic High School. So this was like an industrial arts high school in St. Joseph. It later became the junior college. This card, if you notice at the top, erroneously states it's Robidoux Street instead of Robidoux School. Now in the background in the left, you can see the First Christian Church. And when they abandoned that building and moved down the street a few blocks and built a new building, that became the student union for when this was the junior college. And the junior college later turned into Missouri Western State College and now Missouri Western State University. Central High School. This was the earliest large high school built in St. Joseph. This was on 13th Street, but just to the south of Massaini. Today, there is a more modern, it was the Naval Reserve building, it was located at this location after this building was taken down. This is a real photograph view of the same school building. And if you look to the lower right, you can see another little building in the background, and that was Everett School. That school at one point was overflow classroom for Central High School. And when Central High School moved out to its current location, that once again became a grade school in the background. And then this building became a middle school. Now this is a real photograph postcard, as opposed to the other ones I've shown you so far, which were all printed views. A real photo postcard is literally just that. It is a photograph. Anybody who had a camera in those days could make their own postcard. You literally just either bought the postcard sized photo paper and developed it yourself, or you could send it away and request that it come back to you as a postcard. This was a local photographer by the name of Hedrick, and he numbered and signed all of his cards with a little H and then a number. And he was not a professional photographer. He was just, he ran a grocery store over on Farron at about 29th. But he would correspond with other photographers around the country, and they would all exchange postcards. So I seldom find his images here in St. Joseph. It's usually somewhere else that I have to be in order to find postcards, because he always sent them away to other people. From Central High School, this is a view that you would have. This is 4 postcards that are meant to be set side by side. Again, early, about 1906 or so, but it's showing a panoramic view of looking west from Central High School up on 13th Street. Now, this is the Central High School that we have today. Its real address is 26th and Edmond Street, and it was built in 1933. The view that you're looking at here is from Noyes Boulevard, looking to the east across where the tennis courts should be, and the football field and track and everything. But you'll note that they're not present in this picture, so they weren't there yet. Another view of Central High School from the air. This dates from probably the late 1930s, early 1940s. You can see in the upper right, you can see the track and field and the football field and everything there in the center. The houses that are in the lower left corner are all gone today. That would be the location of where the sophomore annex and the freshman annex behind Central are today, and then the parking lot. Now, the houses that are in the lower right across the street to the south are all still present. We have Benton High School. This is the original Benton High School, which would be west of the current Benton High School up on the hilltop. And actually, when this school was being built, during the excavation process, they discovered Native American grave sites at this location, and it became a big archaeological dig for a while they were getting ready to build the school. Oddly enough, I have yet to ever find a postcard of the current Benton High School. Postcarding by that time, when that school was built, was not near as popular as it was in the first part of the 20th century. So a lot of the schools that came later are not represented on postcards, at least that I have been able to find so far. This is Christian Brothers College. This is at 13th and Henry Streets. There's a city park up there today. The stone wall and everything around it in the foreground still exists. This building was built, I believe, in about 1857, and it was not quite finished or just had been finished by the time the Civil War broke out. And the building was requisitioned and used to house soldiers. And so it wasn't until after the Civil War that this opened back up as a school. Christian Brothers later moved, I think it was 1927, out to Noyes Boulevard, where Bodie Middle School is today. So here's an early view of Christian Brothers, or what we would today call Bodie Middle School. Christian Brothers was, of course, the Catholic boys' high school in St. Joseph. They closed in about 1970 or 71, and it was bought by the St. Joseph School District and opened as Bodie Middle School in 1972. Oddly enough, I find it kind of ironic that the Catholic diocese or the Catholic bought this property. This property at one time was owned by the leader of the local Ku Klux Klan. And it just always struck me a little ironic that the two opposing owners of that property. This is titled the Colored High School. This is at about 18th and Angelique. This was Bartlett High School, as it was known, but it was an all-black high school. It was later torn down, and it's the same location where Horace Mann School is today, which is all a part of the mid-city area there at 18th and Angelique, where the playgrounds are, and there's a gymnasium there. This is a real photo postcard that shows the inside of the gymnasium at Bartlett High School, and this was their band. What a great image, everybody with their instruments in front of the stage. Of course, this was a black high school, so all the students that you see there are all black. This was the German English school. This today, the wall still stands there. It's a parking lot at the corner, I'd be the southeast corner of 10th and Felix. So this would be the parking lot for the St. Joseph School District employees, a catty corner across the street from the downtown public library. But this was the German English school. It was a great school. Of course, we had a large German population in St. Joseph. Again, we have a real photo postcard. This is Bliss School, which is still standing. It's Bliss Manor now. I think it's a retirement living sort of facility, but it is at the corner of 30th and Lafayette Streets. It's the only view of that particular school I've ever found on a postcard. Oftentimes you'll find multiple views spanning different eras of the same school, but the images are generally quite the same. This is Humboldt School. This is, up until recently, was the oldest still in use public school in St. Joseph School District. It's located at 2nd and Cherry Street. I think its original name was the Third Ward School. Then it was later named Humboldt. I believe it was built in about 1901. I love this one because all the students are out in front. That tower that you see in front of the school building there kind of looks like a smokestack. That was actually a fire escape, and it was a spiral slide inside the center of it. So you could access it from any one of those floors and slide down to safely exit the building if there was a fire. Central High School, the old Central High School, had one of those or two of those on the back side of it as well. And my grandfather went to that school, and I always thought, well, how did you keep kids out of that? Because wouldn't that have been great just to be able to jump in there and slide down to the next floor or a different, to exit the building? And he says, kids did it all the time, but you only did it once. He says, you have to keep in mind that everybody burned coal back in those days to keep warm. And so that thing would, because it wasn't used, would fill with the ash and soot from the coal dust in the air. He says, so if you jumped in it and slid down it for the fun of it, the backside of you was completely black. And so everybody always knew what you did and you always got in trouble. But I thought that was just a sign of the times. This is Washington School. This again was a grade school, elementary school, and it was located at 5th and Poland Streets. It was later replaced with a larger building that still stands there today. It's been empty for a long time. And it's a much larger building than what is shown here, but it's hoping to be redeveloped at some point into something else, but it's still standing. But this particular building, I think, was here from 1869 until about 1908. Ernst School was named after Charles Ernst, who was an early board member of the local Board of Education from 1871 to 1883. But this was located on Fifth Avenue, just to the east off of St. Joseph Avenue. If you remember where the pharmacy used to be there on about a block off of St. Joe Avenue, that would be the location of Ernst School. This again is an early card about 1905, 1906. Lincoln School, this was a Black grade school. Now this was on St. Joseph Avenue, just to the north of Middleton. So there's a VFW, or there was a VFW hall there in what had been another school building that had replaced this school building. You'll notice that a lot of these early schools like this all have the same black and white look with a white border around them. They were all produced at the same time, and all typically you'll find they'll have an advertisement on the back for Independent Messenger Company, which was a local business, and they used them as advertising cards. But they all are from that same period of time, about 1905, 1906, when they have this look. This school opened in 1894 and operated into the late 1940s or early 1950s until it was replaced. This is Everett School. Again, that same series of cards. This is Musser School. Musser was on Olive Street at about 24th. There's a post office, one of the old branch post offices was directly across the street. The post office is still there. Of course, this school is gone. But if you drive by that location today, you'll notice that there's two more modern houses that sit in that corner that don't fit the rest of the neighborhood. And that's where this school building stood. Love this one. This is a recent find in the last couple of years. It showed up at an estate sale. This is Wyatt School, which honestly I had never heard of until I found this and I had to do some research. But Wyatt School was at the corner of 11th and Henry Streets, and it operated from 1900 to 1930. When I found this one, it actually came with 6 or 7 real photo student cards like this. These are postcards as well, but they are showing the different classes of the students within the school. So I've included a couple of them here. You might notice the name E. Brackenberry stamped into the lower right corner. He was the photographer, a local photographer. Oddly enough, you just don't find images of his other than things like this. There'll be school images or classroom pictures. But you know, St. Joseph had a lot of photographers, but most of them were studio photographers. Not a lot of them did postcards. Another student view of the steps there at Wyatt School. Notice how everybody's dressed. I just marvel at what kids wore to school in those days versus what kids wear today. This is a really unusual card. This is a printed view. So it's, you know, a real photo view could be a one-of-a-kind image. If you were an amateur photographer and made one and only produced one, that's it. This is a printed image. Well, you know, they didn't print just one image. To set up a printing press to run images, you don't print just one typically. But this is an interior view of the landing on the staircase at McKinley School, which was in the South End. But it's the only view of McKinley School I've ever found on a postcard. Never found the outside of the building. Never found any other interior views. This is the only one. This is Hyde School, and it's located in the South End. Still in use today as an elementary school. It's at South 5th Street and Thompson Avenue. So it's basically south and east a little bit of Benton High School today. This again is a real photograph postcard. This is Hosea School. And I think that this is in the same location or similar location as to where Hosea is today, which is on Pryor Avenue, just off of West Valley in the South End. But if you look closely at this picture, you can kind of see the transition as this school grew. If you look at the far right, that blank wall, if you look closely, you can see where there's shadows of where windows had been bricked in. So that was all windows on that side of the building at one point. Then they were closed in. And then the middle section where the smokestack is, looks like that could be an addition onto the building at the right. And then the furthest portion to the left looks like another addition. So it's kind of interesting to see the transition or the additions of the building as it goes along. This is the only real photo postcard, or the only postcard I have ever found of this school. This was Douglas School in the South End. And this was a school that was termed, it was an elementary school, and it was termed a school for non-white children. So if, whites were the only allowed in the public schools at this time. And so that's why you had a black high school, some black elementary schools. But this one wasn't termed a black elementary school, but it was for non-white children. And maybe in the South End, you had some other nationalities other than the black population in St. Joseph that would have gone to this school as well. I'm not 100% sure where this building was located. I believe it was on Iowa Street, just to the west of Lower Lake and King Hill area there. Long gone. This is, you can tell by the condition of this card, it's in horrible shape, but it's the only one of this I have ever found, and I'd love to find an upgrade in condition. But this is Crosby School, and it was at the corner of Savannah Avenue and Richardson Street. It opened in 1879 and closed in 1917. This is Miss West School for Girls. You might notice or recognize the building. It still stands. It's at 2608 Jewell Street. Jewell's is a one-way heading east. And as you crest the hill and look off to your right, they're just up the hill from Noyes Boulevard. This building stands there with those big columns across the front. It was apartments for years. In fact, my great-grandmother and my grand-aunt lived there for a long time. I don't know what's going on with the building at the moment. It doesn't look like it's very much occupied at the moment, but this was a private girls' school when it was built. Of course, we have Sacred Heart Academy. The story, as I understand it, was in the late 1840s, there was a party of nuns coming to the United States from France, and they were caught in a severe storm at sea. And they prayed that if they survived, they would found and dedicate an institution to St. Joseph. They did survive, later made their way to St. Louis, and upon reaching St. Louis, learned of a new community upriver on the Missouri called St. Joseph. I guess it seemed like fate. They arrived here, and in 1853 founded the Academy of the Sacred Heart. The center portion of the building is the original building. Now, this stood at 12th and Angelique. Today, it's the home of Oak Ridge Apartments. But that center section of the building that you see there is the original portions, and then the two other side hyphens or additions were added on later. Of course, this was the Catholic girls' school in St. Joseph, and it was quite the finishing school, I guess. Wealthy patrons sent their daughters here from all over the country to reside and to be educated at Convent of the Sacred Heart. This is the front entrance to the building. This is a view of the inside of the chapel. This is a double length postcard, so it opens up lengthwise and it gives you these three views of the property. It's not a card you see very often. Now, not what you would consider a normal school in St. Joseph, but this is Ensworth Hospital Medical College. This was located at the corner of 7th and Jewells. So there's a city parking lot there directly across the street from the First Presbyterian Church downtown. This is where that building stood. And it was built as a hospital, but it was a teaching hospital. So it was the combination of St. Joseph's Medical College and the Ensworth Medical College, and they combined into the Ensworth Hospital. But they had a teaching surgery room and all that sort of thing. But the building later became a steam cleaning business and then was torn down. Of course, we have Platt's Commercial College. I mean, not just the local school district schools we have in St. Joseph. We have some other private or other types of educational opportunities. There was Gard Business University, and then there was Platt's Commercial College. This is Platt's Commercial College at 9th and Frederick, Frederick being on your right, 9th Street being on your left. This was part of that triangular block. The other end of this corner in the distance would be what most people referred to as the Flatiron Building, or the Bartlett Trust Company building, or the Howlett Building. Today, this is where that new parking garage is downtown. That you can no longer drive Frederick Avenue from 9th Street to 8th Street. And that is all today a part of that parking structure, that new parking structure. It was torn down during urban renewal. Of course, this is a real photo view of the Platt Gard combined business university graduating class, and they are posing out behind City Hall on the park side. Now, like I said earlier, not all St. Joseph schools are represented on postcards. I assume that there are some real photos out there that I have yet to find. Most oftentimes they will be unidentified, and unless somebody just happened to write a note on the back or something, which makes it really tough. If you don't know what those other schools looked like at the time, it's easy to pass them by. This is just a copy of a postcard that I know exists. It's not in my possession. It's not in even a collector's hands, but it's Lafayette High School up on Highland Avenue, which was built in 1917. But it is the guy that owned, or the woman that owns it, it was her husband's. He went to high school there, and I've never been able to get her to sell it. The best I've been able to do is get a copy of it. But it just illustrates that there's probably so many other postcards out there that I have yet to find. Just like Wyatt School, until that estate sale, I didn't know that school even existed. So there's so many schools that are not represented on postcards, and I'm hoping that over time I'll be able to track them down and find them. But that's literally the last St. Joe school postcard that I have to show you. It's not the longest presentation in my repertoire, but I hope you enjoyed it. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer questions. Felix Street Postcards is my business. Buying and selling antique postcards is what I do for a living, which is wonderful because I get to make a living out of something that I'd be doing for free anyway, because I just love postcards. They're just snapshots of history, and I love history. And my combination of loving St. Joe's history, it just works out wonderfully. So if anybody has any questions, I'm sure Sarah will open up the mic, and feel free to ask.
Thank you, Cole. I am surprised I didn't even know some of those schools existed in town too. So I'm glad you have the resources in the collection to show us all these. But yes,
I have photographs of other schools, but they're not on postcards. So
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a couple more photographs of the Douglas School in the museum collection, which is really neat to find. We have a couple of their yearbook photos. So it was nice to see the outside of that building.
I've always wondered what's sitting in the museum's collection that I would love to see. So
well, come on down. We'll try to open them up for you.
That would be great. I would love to do it. If you have things that are unidentified, I'd love to help you identify them. So
sounds great. But anybody on the Zoom call, feel free to, you can unmute yourself and show your video if you want, if you have a question, or feel free to stick it in the chat. The same with our Facebook group. If you just comment a question, I'll give you a couple minutes here to write those down. Cole, I know you said some of them you find at estate sales. Is there any other places that you usually come across these postcards?
Well, it's when I first started collecting St. Joe cards, I honestly thought I would collect all 50 that existed and I'd be done. I really had no idea what I was stepping off into. But, you found them at antique shops and the antique show, things like that. And didn't take very long to realize that it was going to be a whole lot more than 50. But early on in starting to collect St. Joe cards, I thought I was the only crazy person out there that liked old postcards. I'd been collecting them since I was a little kid. But I, as a young adult, discovered a an ad somewhere for what they call the IFPD, which is the International Federation of Postcard Dealers. So I wrote them a letter to find out what that was all about. And they sent me back a list of all these dealers across the country that dealt in postcards that would do approvals. And an approval back in those days meant you told them what you were looking for. They would package up St. Joe cards and ship them to you. You picked out what you wanted, paid for them, paid for the postage, and you shipped the rest back. Prior to the internet and everything, that's how everybody did business with postcards. I was just amazed. All these people, I sent out 140 letters, and I had postcards in my mailbox every day for more than 6 months. And it was great because I was finding cards I'd never seen before. I still have cards that I got then, I still have never seen again available. But I discovered that there were postcard shows all over the country. And there was one coming up in Wichita in October at that point. So I went to that show, walked into a school gymnasium, and there was 35 dealers there, all set up with just 8-foot tables full of postcards, boxes. I spent every dollar I had and came out of there with one check left to my name, and just found wonderful stuff. But it opened up a whole new world of postcard dealers, postcard collectors, things like that. And I have not missed that show in 32 years, 31 years, I guess, until COVID came along. But there's this whole network of people that are interested in postcards. So quite honestly, a lot of them come through that. When eBay came on, then that opened up a whole nother opportunity, but it's still very seldom that I come on to St. Joe cards that I don't have. That original thought that I might get all 50 or so, I'm in the 3,000 to 4,000 range at this point, and I still know of at least 100 that other collectors have that I still don't have. So they're out there. There's something showing up every year. I find a few that I've never seen before. So that's kind of where they show up and where I get them.
That is super interesting. I know our Cole at the museum, he collects postcards too of Rushville. So he will
Rushville, yeah.
have some
I
pop
have
up
found
every
him a
once in a
few
while.
through the years. So.
Yeah, right. He's still trying to find a few of them. But I love how it's that kind of treasure hunt. You just kind of happen upon them every once in a while. Especially
People
if you're
often ask me what my favorite St. Joe postcard is, and the answer is always the same. It's always the next one, the one I don't have yet. Or there are those ones that I know of that are in other people's collections that I covet and hope to find. I have copies of them, thankfully, but I'm still looking for them. And some of them, honestly, the heyday of postcards was 1907 to about World War I, 1918. And then they kind of fell off in popularity and just became this touristy thing that you picked up at the Grand Canyon or the hotel you stayed in. And so you still find those from things from that era of St. Joe, but people didn't save them like they did the early ones because they'd have that album in the parlor where they would put all the postcards. So the postcards that date from the 1950s on, the things you got in the mail that said, it was time for your oil change from your local garage, things like that, people didn't save. They just threw them away. So there's a lot of cards that I know of that are from the 70s, from the 60s, that I still do not have, that you would look at them and think, well, that's a really common image, but I can't find it. I haven't been able to. One in particular that comes to mind, if you remember the old Surrey shop, which was a clothing store out at the mall, and it's a postcard that shows the entrance to the Surrey shop. So it dates from the 1960s or the early 1970s, and I know it exists, but I still haven't found one. So it's on my list of things to find.
Have you seen recently, I only know about this from a recent museum association meeting, the Patey House, or not Patey House, the Pony Express just had a recent donation too of one of those folding cards that you showed us. And the inside of it is the whole Pony Express across the country. I think they're reproducing that, but that's another
Yep.
Oh my gosh, they had to have it because it was one of those unique folding out postcards no one has seen for years.
Yeah, it's crazy, some of the things that you cannot imagine a subject matter that wasn't put on a postcard. That's what's amazing. I have as a dealer, because that's what I do for a living, as a dealer helping other collectors find things for their collections. Some of the things that you get asked for, any postcard that shows birthday cake with candles, as long as the candles are lit, dust pans and brooms. Probably the oddest one was real photo postcards of cows standing in water with their heads turned to the left. Don't ask me why, but there's There's somebody out there collecting it, looking for it, and you cannot imagine a subject matter that was not put on a postcard. Probably one of the most unique ones I have of St. Joe is they're about 1907, 1908 advertising cards for the Davis Milling Company, which of course was Aunt Jemima pancake flour. And but the postcard is very nondescript on either side, but it opens up and you're looking at a pile of paper. And there's a hole on the backside, and if you blow in the hole and pull up on the paper, it literally pops up into this three-dimensional shape of the building. And it has the whole front of the building, wagons down the sides, the loading dock and everything. And of course, it's very fragile. And I have two different versions of it, but it's things like that that are just so unusual. But what's the survivability of them? You play with them a few times and they're kind of fall apart. But just how creative they were at coming up with ways to use postcards as advertising, something to capture your attention, something to make them as a business stand out to you.
Wonderful. Amy Coates had said that she'd love to see theaters of St. Joseph. Do you have any in your collection that, I don't know, maybe
I do.
we do another presentation like this on the theaters?
That would actually be, theaters by themselves would be a very short presentation on St. Joe postcards. But what's amazing is there was a theater almost in every block downtown at one time. But on postcards, there is the Lyceum, Orpheum, the Tootle. Oddly enough, I've never seen one of the Trail Theater. Of course, Trail Theater was built in the 50s. There was the Colonial, there was the Pantages, there was the Princess, the Empress, the Joetown. Not all of those are represented on postcards, but those are all just in the downtown area. Then there was the Hickory, there was the Olive Street, there was the Regal on St. Joe Avenue, the Uptown up on Frederick Avenue. They were all over the place. But then there are some that show some interior views of the theaters downtown, which are really fun. So
Amy, keep an eye out. Maybe Cole and I'll work up a presentation and add those in there with something else, maybe a downtown postcard.
Absolutely, love to do it.
All right, well, I don't see any other questions on either Facebook or on here. So Cole, thank you for having the time to do this with us today. Everybody that's on with us right now, our next program that we're going to do on Zoom and Facebook again is on May 20th. Kim Schutte is going to be telling us the story of Faye Sudo and her unsolved mystery. So if you enjoy this presentation and find that intriguing, feel free to sign up for that on our website or through Facebook. Cole, have a good afternoon.
Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it very much.